Welcome back, folks. Today I have a friend, a special guest, Mr. Tucker Max. Tucker and I met through way of FRD, Front Row Dads. And one of the things that's interesting that I'd sort of share about Tucker is that I've had very few but potent conversations with him, some of which we'll probably talk about today. But I appreciate those conversations, Tucker, if I haven't told you before. They've been inspirational and helpful, among other words I could use. And my thing on this show is to allow guests to introduce themselves. So, who is Tucker Max?
Oh man. Well, right now, I spend my time. I have a 50-acre homestead in Dripping Springs, Texas. And so we got sheep, chickens, bees, all that kind of stuff. Planting all kinds of stuff. So I work on that, and I have 4 kids, all under 9 or under. The oldest is 9. And so two are in the school that I helped found. There's a Waldorf in Dripping Springs, and then one is being homeschooled because there weren't enough kids for a class at the Waldorf. And then one is just like little. She's a year and a half. And so, so homeschooling one of my kids and building my homestead, man, that's pretty much it for right now.
That's exactly why I wanted to record this, is that you're doing some things in the world around homesteading. And as you mentioned, I had actually forgotten about that you helped found a school that are inspiring. I also think that parts of them are courageous, and that's my interpretation, because I want to do similar things. And so as I learn and explore this with you, let's start with the homesteading. So what sparked this? Why did you choose to do that, to go buy 5 acres and start homesteading?
50.
50 acres, yes, my bad.
Not 5.
Yeah.
5 would be rough. Well, I mean, my wife and I had always wanted to be on land. We wanted to buy land and kind of live on it, whatever. And it was one of those things where, most people, for most things, they want, like, oh, one day, or we're thinking about it, or this is what we want to do. And we were definitely in that space about land.
Mm-hmm.
And then 2020 came along, and lockdowns and the massive expansion of governmental authoritarian power, and all the riots and all of the other nonsense. And we were like, okay, like I thought I was awake and understood the world, and I did in a lot of ways, but there was a depth to it that I did not understand, and that really woke me up. And the moment where I really was like, oh shit, we have to get on land, was January 6th of 2021, when I watched a news feed of a bunch of drunken doofuses being led into the Capitol, and then in real time the American media tried to tell me that was a dangerous insurrection. I was like, no, that's just not true at all. Right? And it's funny because I spent 20 years in media. I know they lie about everything. Right. But to watch that, and then like all the subsequent stuff, like, I mean, there's 30 or 40 people in jail now, like, who literally were let into a building in what amounts to a little bit of a ruckus, but what amounts to, in America at least, a peaceful protest. And I was like, all right, so that day I realized that America, I don't know when the American Republic fell, but it was over. And we were long past the American Republic falling. We were now in the empire collapse stage. And I was like, oh shit. Like, I missed this. Most people have, but nonetheless, I like to think I'm smart and ahead, and I wasn't at that moment. I was like, uh-oh, we need to get our shit together. And so we'd always wanted to get on land, and it was like, let's go. So it took us a little while to find the right place, but we did. And so now I went from being like most people. I lived in a city I bought all my food at a grocery store. I was absolutely, completely dependent on other people for everything. And now I own my own water supply. I have two water supplies, both of which are fully owned and contained. I own my own meat supply. Like I make all my own chicken, I make all my own lamb. And when I say I make, I mean my sheep are born here, they live here, I kill them here, I gut them here, I hang them here, and I butcher them here. They never leave my land. Same with chickens. We do meat chickens as well as eggs. So, I mean, I have 90 something meat birds in my freezer right now that I raised this year here. Um, and so, like, meat, I don't do cows on my land. I decided not, we had cows for a while, but I decided not to. But I get my meat from a rancher who is about an hour away, who I know personally, and who literally puts nothing in his cows except grass and water. No anti-parasitics, no vaccines. Not He's way beyond organic. Like
Yeah,
he's
wow.
religious about like, and so all of my meat is either an owned supply or it's from someone who sees the world I do and lives right by me. Most of my vegetables we get farmers markets or whatever. And like power supply, I have multiple supplies. I'm on grid for power because I'm not a fool or Amish, right? So of course the grid's working, I'm going to use it, but I have multiple backup supplies. And so we live a life that is in most ways normal, but it like, like last winter in Texas, in central Texas, we had a massive ice storm. An inch of ice was on everything. And where I live, power in Austin, power was down for 3 days. Where I live, power down was 5 days. Literally, nothing changed. We have generators, propane, like we have everything. And so it's like nothing changed in our life, right? And so I've created a life where not only am I not dependent on other people for a lot of things. Yeah, of course I don't make my own MacBooks. Like, I mean, like obviously I'm still in the world,
Right.
but for the very important inputs, water, food, etc., I'm not dependent on others. And more importantly than not just dependent on them, now I think most of what passes as food and water and other things are poison. And I'm not involved in that system anymore. Like I
Mm.
don't have to check all my labels at Whole Foods anymore or worry about whether they're being honest about where they're sourcing stuff because I just do. I either do it myself or I know who makes it and I know them and they're my friend and I can just go to their farm anytime and see what they're doing.
Right.
And so,
Like you went back to how things were before we became so complex and
in certain ways, like, there are definitely people, when people talk about living off grid, that's such a fallacy. Even the Amish are not off grid.
mm,
Seriously, no one is off grid anymore. And I mean, almost literally no one. Because people are like, how are the Amish not off grid? They don't use electricity. I'm like, okay, where do they get their tools? They use iron tools, right? They use steel tools. Where do they get those? They're not they're not mining the ore. They're not smelting it. Like they are on the petrochemical grid. Everyone basically on Earth now is, right? So there's no such thing as off grid or on grid. You're on grid. The only question is how reliant are you on other people for all your inputs and how insulated from grid shocks are you?
mm,
Right? Like I'm not fully insulated from all grid shocks. If someone nuked Houston, I'm gonna be affected,
sure.
right?
Yeah.
Like, or like but like, if just as an example, if all of a sudden the US government decided to cancel all currency and roll out central bank digital currency and try and, all this nonsense, like the three main ways they're going to get people to do that is food, water, power,
Mhm.
right? I can't withstand forever. No one can, but I'm not reliant on any governmental entity for those systems, right? And so like I can live in a different way. What my goal is to be as sovereign as possible. There's no such, it's not an on-off switch, right? You're not either sovereign or not sovereign.
Right.
There are degrees of sovereignty. And the more sovereign, not everyone wants to be sovereign. I do. Not free. Free is a different thing.
Sure.
And I want to be sovereign, meaning I decide. I get to have full choice over my life, or as much as possible. I'm a human. I still live in this world. I don't get to decide which laws of physics I obey, right? But sovereign among men. I want to be a sovereign man, meaning like I get to decide what I do and what I don't freely.
Totally. I mean, that is a very comprehensive answer to the why. You even kind of noted on some of the things that I was follow-up curious about around some of the challenges, but I think I think it's really, again, I'll just use the word inspiring because I make up a story that what you're doing is not easy.
Yeah, it's not. No, sovereignty is not easy, man. Sovereignty is almost always the harder path.
Mm-hmm.
Because if someone else is willing to do the hard work for you, yeah, that's easier, dude.
Right,
But
right.
there's a price for that, right? And I like to say that any responsibility you have that you abdicate will be taken up by a tyrant and used against you. I think Jordan told me that. Peterson, like, well, he's a good friend of mine, and like we were talking about something, and he said that. I was like, that's exactly what I was saying, but way way better. And it's true. Now here's the reality, man. Most people are okay with accepting at least some level of tyranny in their lives if it's more convenient and easier. And you know what? Fine. I that's their decision. I mean, and I used to, even though I didn't think I used to be that way. And you could probably point out areas in my life where I'm still doing it now that I don't really realize, or I'm making a cost benefit analysis, or et cetera, et cetera. But like, that's whatever, man. Like, if other people want to be slaves or be half slaves or quasi slaves or wear golden handcuffs or whatever, that's their decision, not mine. It's fine. Like, I'm not gonna do that though.
Yeah,
Right?
I've
I've
sensed
decided it's not gonna happen.
I've sensed that. Like I said, in the few conversations I've had with you, I sense that you're very with your decisions. You don't necessarily preach or tell people what to do, but here's the thing that I've also observed with you, which I think is part of your one of your gifts, at least that's how I filter it, is that sometimes you share or speak with such conviction that it's like, I've told you this before, I'm like, holy shit, has Tucker changed my mind on this? Like, I used to think this, but like what he said makes a lot of sense. And the way he said it, I'm like, I don't feel like he's making this up. I'm observing your body language, and I'm like, he's so grounded in what he just said. So where this goes to, the question I don't think I've asked you before is, what's your process for learning? Because I sense that you have your own way of being in the world and then being curious and then learning something and then back to this component of sharing it. So I have to go all the way back. Like, how do you
What's
learn?
my process for learning or for deciding? Because what you just talked about leading up to that was not about learning, which is, both are great questions. They're just very different things.
Answer the one that speaks to you.
Well, the one that's more in line with what you're talking about is not learning,
Okay.
right? Like, a lot of people focus, like smart internet-y people focus on learning. How do I learn more? They think it's about information. And there are definitely times where that's true. Like when I got out here and got on land, like I knew I didn't know a lot about various aspects of homesteading, but I think I severely underestimated how little I knew. Like the most bit, I didn't know what an impact driver was as opposed to a screwdriver, right? Or a drill. Sorry, and like like I didn't know any, I had no concept of any of this stuff. Some of the most basic things. I'm like, oh, I didn't know that. Right. So there was definitely an information gap for me. Right. But filling an information gap nowadays is trivially easy. Like I honestly, like it's breathtaking to me to think about if I'd moved on and tried a homestead, let's say, what is it, 2023? Let's say 20 years ago, how fucked I would have been.
Mm.
Where the hell in 2003 would I have learned all this? Like I would have had to hire somebody who, like, someone who's been doing this for a while, but lives in the country, whatever, to teach me all of these things. The things that you are right, that would be basic skills for a 12-year-old 70 years ago. I don't know anything about it.
Mm-hmm.
And so like, but today, bro, YouTube,
Right,
YouTube,
right.
YouTube. And it was like simple and like so funny. Like a lot of my friends who come out here from like city are like, wow, how'd you learn all this? You must be so smart. I'm like, you have YouTube too. There's nothing. Like, how did you do that? I'm like, I watched a video and literally just did exactly what he did. And so it's funny. We were processing meat birds, and someone came out and they're like, how did you learn all this? I'm like, there's thousands of videos online that literally show people doing this exact thing. Which actually brings me to kind of back to the point. If there's a scarcity now, it's not on information. It used to be.
Right.
Like almost all of our institutions and all of the common wisdom that humans operate on is based on the idea of a scarcity of information. That is gone, at least right now. What there is a scarcity of, I think, are people who, things like courage, decision making, wisdom, effective judgment, things like that, right? It's like I can go on YouTube and find a video to tell me literally how to do anything on this homestead, and I mean that like almost totally literally. But like, what should I be doing? Right? What do I need to focus on? In what order? What's the most important thing? Like that's judgment and wisdom, right? And there's a scarcity of that. And then the level above that is what I would call self-awareness. Right? Like, what do I even want? Like, why am I on a goddamn homestead? Like making things with my hands? Why? Like, what's my ultimate goal? Like, where am I trying to get to? What's my goal? And so understanding, which you can call self-awareness or values or whatever, but I think which actually brings back to your original question, why do we get on land? And I gave you a very sort of a good answer, but it was sort of like, what's the trigger that woke me up, that made us actually go get land? But we wanted to be on land before. And why? And I'll tell you why, because I think this gets to what the core of what you were asking. I think we had a belief before we came out here that being on land would enable us to connect better with ourselves by connecting with nature.
Yep.
And it was in certain ways a pretty naive belief. I can just say, like, the way I thought about it then was naive. Now, I can tell you, having 2 years out here, I was right. But I was right for reasons I didn't really understand. I was a lot more right than I realized for reasons I didn't really understand. So like, but being on land has been it. Let's say I'm totally wrong about the way I see the world and everything. Yeah, there's some stuff going on, but let's say everything's basically safe. I don't need to have my own water supply. If food, like let's just say for safety reasons, I'm way off base. Okay, cool. Like let's say you like I knew that to be a fact. I would still want to be here, and I would still be very happy with being here. I would just have spent too much money on things like a big rainwater catchment system and 2 generators, and I got way too many fucking bullets. Like I would have wasted $250,000 on various security things, or $500,000, whatever, on what I don't need it. but I'm still super, super happy I'm here because what land does, especially if you're working land, animals, it forces you, not force you, it enables you, in some ways it does force you, but it enables you to really reflect on yourself and get honest with yourself.
Yes.
Like if you live in a city and you want to lie to yourself, it's really easy. In fact, all the skids are greased for living in someone else's reality and buying into their world and not actually having to think about who am I and what do I want and what would that cost me. And I don't just mean money. And what are my values and all that. Like it's so easy to just to live in Austin and vote Democrats and believe what everyone else believes and whatever, right? But land forces you to test your beliefs. Being out here does. Being in nature, in a lot of ways. And like, I mean, I can have all the ideas in my head in the world about sheep and about coyotes and about dogs, but their interaction is independent of my beliefs,
Right.
right? Like, I may think coyotes shouldn't kill sheep. Coyotes don't care. They get a vote too, right? And so, like it forces you to really look at yourself, especially if you're in a mind space like where I think you are. And I have definitely been in the last 10 years. And when I met you, you already were uh, of true, honest self-reflection and self-awareness. That's been the greatest gift of this land is that it has not just tested me, because you can find tests. I mean, I can go to a CrossFit gym and test myself until I die. Like you can, it's not about just about testing yourself. It's about forcing you to face yourself and your truths and then your interaction with the world, right? Because like I said, out here, it's not just, I can't live in this world where I'm the only thing that exists. You know, everything else out here gets a vote too. Does that all make sense?
Beyond making sense. I mean, it's very real what you're sharing. And thank you. I appreciate the note because self reflection, awareness is arguably the most important word in my life in the last several years. Just owning it, like you said, facing it. And there's that feels like the gravity that pulls me, that makes me really fascinated and intrigued by what you're doing. And I'll go back to, it's such a real answer because if there's anything I also love to speak up about, it's nature. My version of what you're doing is getting into the mountains as much as I can. And I come back and I'm like this different version of like, wait a second, there's all these people and they want things and they've got all these crazy ideas that don't land with me like they used to. Whereas there's something very, very pure and like almost brutal, acute to face in nature.
Yeah.
It just kind of guides you back to yourself. And that's how I would describe that. So it's beautiful. What it makes me curious about, Tucker, is that what do you see in your children now? Because they're with you, they're with themselves in this experience.
So I think my wife and I already did a pretty good job raising our kids, but it's been way better since we got out here.
Mm,
Because what land has enabled, it gives space for that. Now the kids have all their own space that they want, right? And also like they live in reality. Like they don't live on screens.
right.
So, for example, when we just processed a bunch of meat birds, and one of the other FRDs actually came out and helped us with his daughter, Chris Bardick. I don't know if you know,
Oh,
but
yeah.
it came with his daughter. And they're great, man. They're like kind of in this world too. And like, uh, when I say processed meat birds, just to be really so people don't understand, we take birds that are alive and we kill them and then do a bunch of stuff to them so they are now a whole bird that goes into the freezer that we then eat, right? And so like yeah, my kids had kind of like done it a little bit with me, but they'd never really gone through the whole process. We had like 40 to process. It's like a lot of work, dude. This is hard physical labor. And these are, you know, like these are pretty big 6, 7, 8 pound birds, right? So these are, I mean, they're not huge, but these are living things that don't really, you know, don't really, I don't know, like, oh yeah, let me just go die, right? I mean, chickens kill themselves all the time. They're idiots, but they wanted to live. And so I kind of did the first few. I showed Chris and his daughter and my kids and my wife, like, okay, here's exactly how we do it. And then we kind of set up an assembly line. And what ended up happening is my 9-year-old Bishop and then Chris's 9-year-old, he's got a 9-year-old girl, and they were really into killing the birds, right? So they would go in, we'd assemble them into these small cages so we don't have to chase them everywhere. And so they would go in, they'd open the cage, they'd get one of the birds, they put it in, you know, like a kill cone, like it's this cone, upside down cone. You put it in, you pull its head out, and then this is actually really honestly the safest, most humane way to kill the birds is you just cut their throat and they bleed out. It doesn't hurt really much at all. And it's a pretty calm death, right? And it's actually way better for the meat. When they take them to processors, what they'll do is stun them first with like a little stun gun, you know, and so the bird's kind of like unconscious. The problem is it doesn't drain a lot of the blood out, and there's other issues that are kind of weird. We do it just straight halal style, like we cut their throats. And so like at first the kids were obviously like a little, you know, even my kids who've been around a lot of death, because that's what homesteading, that's what meat is at its core is death. And but like they kind of got into it, not in a morose way, because you know the first couple ones we said a prayer over, we understood like, okay, this is, you know, we contextualized fully everything. But bro, by the end, my 9-year-old and his 9-year-old were like totally into this, right? And like they wanted to do a good job. They wanted to make sure the birds weren't suffering. They, you know, they're going to get it right. Like they're not just sticking the knife in. Oh no, it's bleeding everywhere. We don't know what's going on. Like they were doing it right. And they like were really into it. And so like death is a part of life for them now. Like it's not, yeah, it's important and it's impactful, but it's not some traumatic thing. And they understand how, where, what, when it's appropriate, how it fits in, how to do it the right way, all those sorts of things. So these sorts of things that can be really sort of weird and traumatic for kids now are just like a part of their life, and they really love it. They like it. Like I go hunt, I go, you know, we go hunting all the time, and like, well, I'll shoot a deer, and then we say a prayer over it. We think it's for its sacrifice and whatever. And so like when my kids eat chicken or deer, you know, like they're like, oh, this was from when I was hunting. Like they're food is not a thing that comes from the store to them, right? And death is not an abstraction that we don't talk about. Food comes from their land that they raised, and death is a part of life because it is.
Right.
So it's actually a part of their life. And they're now so mature and so connected both to themselves. They're connected to themselves, but they're connected to the land because they understand this is all one big system and we are a part of it, and here's how we connect to it. And I'm a part, like my emotions are part of me, and that's part of the system. If I'm angry trying to kill chickens, things aren't going to go well. If I'm in a, you know, if I'm centered and focused, things go well for me and the bird. You know, I don't cut myself, et cetera, et cetera. So my kids just they have such a self-possession that honestly, like, I don't really even think about until like we'll go, let's say, into town, and then we'll like maybe go to a park or something because we're in town and then I'll see them around kids who like are on their screens all the time, eating sugary crap and totally disconnected from reality. And I'm like, oh my God, those mongrels. Like, 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 I don't even think of my kids as being that great or different until I see them around an average kid in a city. And I'm like, oh, wow, dude,
It's
you
intense.
know?
We feel
Yeah,
this.
I know. And it's not like a kid can't be healthy in a city. Of course it can. Like
Right.
they have friends who live in Austin whose parents do a pretty good job and they're like, whatever. But like, I'm talking about the average kid. It's shocking to me, dude. How, I mean, obviously we did this. I know we're outliers but I don't think about it that way until I'm looking at some kid who's the same age as mine, who seems developmentally 3 years behind, who has serious behavioral issues, who, you know, like I'm just like, oh man. And then I see their parent who's really honestly head in a phone, not really that different. And I'm like, oh well, this is the opposite of sovereignty. This is what happens, you know, if you make different choices.
100%. Well, I love so much of that, and I would I would share that even here where we live in Denver in the suburbs currently, and my children go to a nice public school that should probably be a private school with how well it's funded, and there's this shock that I feel and even sometimes absorb when I take them or bring them home from school and they're in an environment. And while it's hard to not judge, um, I'm in agreement that there's a part of me just like, wow, it's a very different experience what we do in our home, and then what my good friend just recently described as consensus reality, the way everyone else wants to be. And again, not trying to judge because that's not the intention here. It's just like, whoa, it's so clear to me what's going on, and these kids have no idea, the parents aren't even present. And so back to your point, what's missing from the equation amongst several things: land, connectedness,
Yep.
awareness.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, so then this segues into the last big thing that I was curious about, because we've talked about this, and this is where I have a lot of energy, and it's a place where when you speak to this, I feel that there's parts of you that know this is perhaps a way for you to inspire or even a calling. And I'm going to use a word, and then I'm actually going to give you the freedom to go wherever you want with this. It's the word avatar,
Yeah.
because you've taught me things about that word.
Yeah.
And
Well, you can tell the story if you want. I have no problem, or I will. Like that, it's a funny story because like you guys looked at me like I was fucking nuts. That I remember it, and I don't blame you, bro. I don't blame you.
great
If
memory
someone
too.
had said that to me when I was at a lower level of consciousness, or different evolution time, I'd have been like, "The fuck are you talking about, you weirdo?" Like totally. Like that's why I wasn't even upset. I'm like, "Yeah, dude, I get it." Like it's fucking weird.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love, well, this is the context I'll give. And then again, I would actually, I want you to share what you
Okay. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
is that I think there's a lot of people in the world that perform. And at the basic level, I think they're performing for external validation, right? So we're talking about land and finding yourself and really
Yeah.
facing awareness.
Yep.
And so that's not an avatar to me, especially when I heard you say it a few years ago. It's like an avatar seems like someone who answers a call to be a beacon, maybe, but to
No,
share.
no, no, no. Hold on.
Yeah,
They
that's
answer
what
a
I need to
call. They answer a call for themselves.
do.
They don't answer a call for any reason outside of themselves.
There we go.
Ever. No, but okay. So the way I would define an avatar is someone who answers a call is a good way to put it. Someone who, let's say, lives the true vision of their life, right? Who who they don't necessarily have to be enlightened in the Buddhist sense, but someone who does the hard work of their life and comes to some realizations or lives or embodies a certain life or idea, or anything like that, and then they become, through living their truest self, they become an example for others. That's it. So, like the famous avatars in history are people like Jesus or Buddha or Krishna, or go down the list. But you don't being an avatar doesn't mean you're famous, right? Like, I mean, I I can think I think my godfather was one, right? And he's not famous at all. If I told you his name, you wouldn't know. I mean, he was very, very well known in his little town that he lived in, and very influential and impactful. But like, it's not about fame. It's about some of them just happen to become well known for various reasons. I mean, the only reason Jesus is super well known is probably because of Paul, right? And the efforts of Paul and the people after Paul, and which is not a knock on Jesus. Just Jesus didn't care if he was famous or not, and Paul did. So that's just kind of how it works, right? Same with Buddha. Buddha didn't care, but his disciples did, and so. And I mean, there's actually, it's the craziest thing, bro. If you study Jewish history, the Jews have a name for avatars. They call them charismatics, and there have been hundreds in Jewish history that like are very, very similar to Jesus in a sense. Not necessarily preaching the same message, but are like very good, very persuasive. Yeah, like not all of them are what I would consider avatars, but they're close enough, right? Because like the charismatics can range from what I think are basically con men to people to Jesus being one. Like he's considered one of the great ones. And so anyway, so the point is uh in this group, there's like four of us who are talking, and I forget what the question was. It was something like, what are you focused on? And I had just like 2 days before had a meeting with someone who you ever meet with, it was very unnerving, man. Like you ever meet with someone who, I don't want to use the word psychic because that brings up a lot of like different associate, but someone who just knows shit about you that they shouldn't know, that doesn't make sense. Not like I can talk to you and read stuff really well, but I don't meet people and I'm like, oh, your dad's middle name is Sam, and like I don't, like that's not right. But you ever met someone like that and you're just like, the fuck is going on? 2 days before that FRD, I had met a woman uh who basically was like confronted me about it. She didn't know me. She didn't know who I was, nothing. And she's like, wow, she's like, in my whole life, I've only met two of you. And I'm like, you met two people named Tucker Max? She's like, no, I've never met anyone named Tucker. Like, she's like, two avatars. And I'm like, the fuck are you talking about? Whatever, like without going even further into like crazy lunatic weirdness. Basically, this woman called me out on this. She's like, look, you know why you're here. You're here to live the most truest self, most authentic self you can, and you have the skills to talk about this and be an example to a lot of people. And she's like, you've already done this, right? And I'm like, and no, she wasn't like a fan like who read my book. She didn't know who I was at all in any way, shape, or form. And I was like, yeah, I mean, I kind of have. And she goes, yeah, no, you haven't. You haven't really done it the way you're supposed to yet. Like that was just practice. And I was like, who are you, you fucking witch? Like, what's going on?
But there's a part of that that you know is true for you, right?
Oh, 100%. Yeah. Like it's not like she came up to me like, you should be in the NBA or some nonsense. Like it was like and it wasn't like I know how to con people like that. Like there's a way hey, you there's so much more to you than people realize. Like you can say that to anybody. No, she was like very specific with some weird stuff. And like I don't know what fully was going on. I'm not going to pretend like, oh, but I do know that like I had that in my head a lot at that point, and I was thinking about that. And so like I just brought that up because it was like for me, like even then and right now, in certain ways I still haven't stepped up, man. Like I think the next major step for me is finishing my next book, right? My next my memoir, and my next memoir. And man, I still haven't done it. Like that's it's so hard, dude. This one's rough. Like I know, I don't mean to sound like arrogant. It's just true. I know everything there is to know about writing memoirs. Like you're talking about information. There's not only could I, but I probably should write the definitive book on how to write a memoir. Like there are great memoir writers in the world, and there are people who know as much as I do. Probably no one knows more. No one knows more than I do on how to write a memoir, how to tell your story. Like that is maybe the thing, if we're talking about specific skills, that I'm the best at in the world. Like if I'm not the best, there's like 5 or 6 of us and we're all right there together, right? It's like an all-star team. Like who's the best person? Oh, whatever, we're all on the all-star team. It doesn't matter anymore. So but dude, this one's kicking my ass because it's not about information. It's not about skills. Right? You can't information your way into courage. You can't information your way into self-awareness. You can't information your way into feeling painful emotions. None of that's about information, man. None of it. Information might help if you're stuck at certain levels or whatever, but like I said, like there doesn't exist any more information about writing memoirs that I could definitely that I need. And even if I like there's nothing left. I know it all, right? And knowing it all is not getting the book written. because telling your story is ultimately a therapeutic process that involves a lot of self-awareness and reflection and emotional work and feeling and courage and love and all these higher difficult emotions. And so it's, if I could information my way there, I'd be done.
Wow, I mean that's powerful because well, thank you for first sharing that beautiful definition of an avatar, because I was about to butcher it. So you brought it right back on track. And then thank you for right here and now being open and just expressing the challenge that, because like we didn't even talk about that. And it's such a cool part of your history. It's not why I want to talk to you today about supporting people writing books, but yes, you've done that. You know that game better than anyone else. And that's cool for you to have the awareness to be like, well, now I got to do this. And there's no way to just like fake it to make it. Like you gotta own it. You gotta face it. That's real.
I mean, that, I don't know what else, like, that's it. That's the, it's one of those things, man, where it's actually one, it's pretty simple. It's it's pretty simple to figure out. It's just not easy to do, you know? Like it's just it's courage is not complicated. It almost never is complicated. Like very rarely they exist. There are situations where it's like it's a moral dilemma, like a true moral dilemma where you really don't know which path to take. That definitely exists. I don't want to pretend like it doesn't. It does, but it's pretty rare. And almost every time, whenever someone tells me, "Oh, I got a huge moral dilemma," I just start asking questions. It's not a fucking moral dilemma. They know exactly what the right thing to do is, but there's a lot of what they'll say next is it's complicated. It's not
Yep.
fucking complicated.
We make it
It's
complicated. Yeah.
because complicated is almost always, not always, but like 95 to 99% of the time, it's complicated is a defense against a difficult, hard decision that you know is right that you don't want to make.
Yeah.
Always. Virtually always.
Mm-hmm. What's coming to me, it's such a simple and arguably cliche term, but we say it a lot in this house when we really own our decisions. And it's hard choices, easy life, easy choices, hard life. And
Yeah.
that's the underlying theme here, which is so real. It's so easy to bypass that, but you just gave a perfect example that a lot. And I step back and pause on that. I'm like, can I break this? Can I prove this false? But most of the time it's true. It's like, oh, the real decision is the harder decision, which leads to the truth, the awareness, the freedom. Man, well, that's a lot. Um, thank you. I have a few quick fun fire questions if you're up for it.
Do it.
The first, what is your favorite book?
Oh man.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
get
All right, if I have to pick one with no like no limitation, fiction, non-fiction, no, like without, because like the better way that I prefer to answer this question is, what's my favorite book, and give me a really niche category because there's so many. But if I could only pick one, I would probably have to pick Confederacy of Dunces by
it.
John Kennedy Toole. In my opinion, it is the best novel ever written, at least in English. People who speak other languages heavily disagree with me in certain ways, and that's fine. They might be right, but in English, I think that's the greatest novel ever written. And that's probably the book I've reread the most in my life. I'm not counting my own, but that's different.
Very cool, dude. That has not been shared. So awesome. Question number two, what animal would you be if not human? Don't say sheep.
Fuck no. Sheep are idiots. And their food. No. Man. That's a tough question, man.
What's your decision process right now? Are you
Well,
envisioning?
I'm thinking about what life do I want
Yeah,
as
right.
an right? Like what experiences do I want? And then the other thing is I like being really highly conscious, right?
Mm.
And I mean that more like as an intellectual way, rather than a spiritual way. Although the two things are not directly connected, but they're often interrelated. And so I'm trying to think what's a highly conscious, like high cognitive ability animal that has a life I would like.
Mm.
Um, man, I want to say dolphins, like, but I know a lot about dolphins and they have pretty like brutal social structures, man. It's not an easy thing to be a dolphin, dude. And maybe orcas, although they're pretty fucking mean, man. Like orcas are like kind of like little
I
sociopaths, dude.
Yes.
And I'm not like trying to I'm not into killing stuff for fun necessarily. But they're very smart, very well. I told you you'll
Oh,
see
there's your
one.
dog. Awesome.
That's bear. Yeah.
Awesome.
I was thinking about dogs, but dogs are too servile, man. That's not my style. Um, so if I have to pick, I'll pick dolphin,
Okay.
but without like that's one I would actually have to really think about.
Cool. All right. I dig it. Yeah. Dolphin's a great answer. And what about elephants? Are they conscious enough for you or no?
Yeah, elephants are very smart, man. Very, very smart. But again, I'm thinking about my assumption is you mean right now.
Yeah, right now.
Uh, Elephants are not in a good spot now, man.
Okay.
Like in terms of where they can live, their environment, they're quite subject to human intervention. Whereas dolphins are not. No animal is immune to it right now, but dolphins have a lot more potential sovereignty than elephants.
Okay. That's fair. I dig it. Last question, Tucker. What's one of your favorite childhood memories?
The first thing that comes to mind is it's a very simple thing. Um, reminds me so much of my third kid, Deacon. Um, my parents weren't really very good parents, and for the most part, the people that really loved me and were like parents in my life were my godparents, Jane and Bill. Like the guy I said, who Bill, I think Bill's an example of an average common man avatar. But like one of the happiest memories, it's happy is the wrong word, more content.
Hmm.
One of the most content, like almost all my memories with Jane and Bill are like this. But there's one very specific, it's so weird. Um, I used to love as a little kid, like about the age Deacon is now, like 4. I would sit in front of the TV, like Bill would be behind me in his kind of lazy boy, and I had like this little chair thing that was on the floor, and it was super comfortable. And they had these wooden parquet bowls, like parquet, like
Yes.
the old Boston Garden parquet floor. And Jane would feed me Doritos and give me um cranberry juice. This is back like before Doritos were super unhealthy. I think they still fried them in tallow then. But like and so I would literally just eat bowls and bowls of Doritos and drink cranberry juice. And I like because it was it wasn't as sweet then. Like food was people don't realize young people now don't realize how fundamentally different food was 40 years ago, 45 years ago. Even like quote junk food was not that junky and not that bad. Before seed oils infected everything. And so like and sugar. And so it was like the sourness of it. And I can just remember like I was so content and so happy with them then. And it just reminds me of my 4-year-old son Deacon. Like he would just sit with me and mommy on the sofa and eat pretzels and drink. He likes little sparkling water and like he loves his little pretzels and like he just happy as a pig and shit, man, like all day, just like I was at that age with that. So that's probably my happiest kid memory.
Love that, dude. I love that not just because I felt it as you're sharing it, and I was trying to like envision this
uh,
Tucker enjoying his Doritos, but dude, I fucking love Doritos as well. And so it's amazing the nostalgia. Whereas even today, like occasionally I buy Doritos and I know how bad they are now. I even tell my kids, I'm like, yo, there's a reason we don't have these a lot. But there's something about eating them and I still lick my damn fingers because
Uh-huh.
that's what I did as a kid, dude.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. I
Uh,
remember.
what a great answer. Tucker, thank you, brother. This was a pleasure. It always is. I appreciate you for creating some space for this. I appreciate for how you show up. Anything left unsaid before we wrap?
I don't think so. Thank you, my man.
All right. I will say this then. I have aspiration at some point to visit the Max Ranch if possible.
Dude, I mean, the doors are open. We have a guest house. Like,
Yeah.
come, bring your family. You have two kids or one kid?
Two young kids, yeah.
Yeah, right. Exactly. What are their ages again? I
Seven
forget.
and
Like
five. 7 and 5.
9 and 5. Right. Let's say 6 and 3, or 6 and 4. It's probably about when last time we talked. Dude, like my kids are 9, 7, 4, and a year and a half. It's a perfect fit. Anytime you want to come, we can slaughter a sheep if you want or not. You can just eat the stuff that's already dead and butchered. No, dude, I do like I was already a good cook. I grew up in a restaurant family, but over the last 2 years, I've become a really fucking good cook. I sold my company, and like my wife is working on scaling her business. So like I already did most of the cooking because I was just a better cook than she was. But like now, like not only do we have badass ingredients, but I've gotten like like I didn't grow up making tzatziki sauce, right? But I'm like, we have lamb now, so it's like, yeah, and so I've gotten like badass at like things like tzatziki or Caesar dressing, or I make all these Vietnamese sauces that go amazing with lamb. And so like, bro, I'm a pretty fucking good cook, dude. Like we do like a lot of badass stuff. So anytime you want to come.
Believe it, and I appreciate that invitation.